We could keep this very short. Galway are definitely going to win.
There's a lot of lads down the Haskell that'll be getting statues before me, so there is.
Described as a blessing that thought he was missing. Strange kind of blessing, Patrick.
That national narrative and does my head in. That we're reliant on Joe Canning. Like, oh my God.
Turkey Burke was in full forward, causing all sorts of problems. Then they were able to bring Badger on for Turkey.
Some might say he did a good job on Conor Whelan. I would say, from my point of view, that he spent half the day assaulting him.
If you want a better tomorrow, start heading for it today. Visit Tony Burke Motors, your local Toyota retailer, and find out how you can lower your emissions and pay less tax than a diesel with Toyota's incredible range of self-charging hybrid cars. There's never been a better time to join the thousands of Galway drivers who've made Toyota the #1 selling car brand in Galway for the 7th consecutive year. Visit TonyBurkeMotors.ie to search our fantastic selection of approved used cars. Start your electric journey in a Toyota hybrid today. Contact Tony Burke Motors on 480123 or email sales@TonyBurkeMotors.ie. Toyota, built for a better world.
Well, it's hard to believe that the league is nearly at a conclusion already. They're still heading into the weekend, final round of fixtures. Galway still have a genuine shot at some silverware. Whether that's important or not in a lot of people's views remains to be seen. But, you know, anytime you can win a cup or that, it's probably should be always regarded as a good thing, particularly in a year like this. I suppose a year like no other we keep hearing, and you know, with chopping and changing within the squad and a bit of experimentation, and you know, Galway management still haven't got, you know, a full year and a full pre-season in due to all that has happened. But I suppose with that, I'll just take us through. Patrick is with me here again, but before I bring him in, I'll just run down through the permutations so that everyone is aware ahead of the weekend what can happen and how can Galway get their hands on maybe giant winners of the National League. I suppose it's out of their hands in one sense. If Tip beat Waterford in their game at the same time, it's they'll be called giant winners with Kilkenny. So no matter what happens, it's firmly in Tip hands at the moment. The thing, you know, that comes into play is if Tip don't get the victory, it opens up the door for both Galway and Cork, which kind of adds an extra element of spice to the game, if nothing else. So in terms of a Tip draw, then if either Galway or Cork win their meeting, it'll be they that'll be crowned giant champions along with Kilkenny, obviously. It'll be Galway on points, Cork on having a superior scoring differential. If Cork and Galway ends in the draw, it means Tip will obviously be joint winners because Galway will lose out in the head-to-head despite being level on points with Tipperary. And then finally, if it's a Tip defeat, it comes out to basically a straight shootout between Galway and Cork at the top of the table. Tip defeat obviously means as well Galway can win with a draw, so that's obviously a good thing. Just on reflection, Patrick, how would you rank the league so far? What are your overall thoughts on it? You know, at this point with a final round to go now, leading in, we've a chance for a bit of silverware. We've learned a lot from the squad. We've learned a lot from management too. What are your thoughts now on reflection?
Yeah, well, a chance for a cup or half a cup even, you know, we'd take that if it came our way as well. But considering, you know, it was always a league where experimentation and trying to unearth a few new players was the goal more so than actually winning a trophy. The fact that we're in with a shout of doing just that, heading into the final round of fixtures, and I think we've pretty much achieved the primary objective of unearthing some new talent. For me, it's been a hugely successful league. We've seen the return to form of some older players as well, which is equally as important as bringing in new talent. You know, performance levels have been up in every week. Probably the one blast was the Tip performance, or certainly two quarters of it anyhow. But by and large, no, I think Shane O'Neill and Fergal Healy and David Ford and John Fitzgerald, they'll all be thrilled with how the league has gone. And you know, provided, fingers crossed, I know there's a couple of knocks going into the game this weekend, nothing significant. Provided we don't pick up a serious knock this weekend, you know, you hopefully have a full panel to pick from for the Leinster semi-final in 3-4 weeks' time. I think they'll be chuffed with how it's gone by and large, you know.
Yeah. Do you have any care in the world if we win the league or not? In the sense that we last won it in 2017. I suppose from a Tip point of view, it's probably arguably more important. They're the Roll of Honour leaders, I think, with 19 league titles. But they haven't won one since 2008, which is quite the drought from them in terms of that probably adds an element that it's slightly more important for them than it is for us. Or would that be something along those lines that you'd reflect on it going into or you'd go along with going into the last round of games?
Yeah, certainly. And in terms of confidence and everything like that, obviously we would have had the better year than Tip last year as well. So probably, you probably could make the argument that maybe it's a small bit more important to Tip, but equally, what a win can do for a team, win a bit of silverware, in terms of confidence, everything like that, it could do an awful lot for this Galway team as well. And not that you're going to say that if they lose to Cork this weekend, it's going to affect them for the week after, because it won't. But equally, all you can get out of winning it is a boost in terms of confidence, especially for younger lads joining the panel, the likes of a lot of the elder statesmen that would have been there in 17, and a few of them, a couple of them in 2010 as well, wouldn't obviously carry the same significance. But if you're a new lad kind of slotting into the fold, think of the likes of Darren Morrissey and Evan Nyland and these sort of fellas that are going to be really, really pushing and right in contention for starting spots come championship, picking up a bit of silverware and having played a big role in your team doing that, it could only serve them well going forward. So it's a case of going all out and trying to win this weekend. And equally, it is the last real significant chance to impress for a lot of lads as well. So that's going to be a bigger motivating factor for me than actually potentially winning the league. And that motivator in itself should be enough, and should see a strong Galway performance again this weekend.
Yeah, every game that seems to go along with this league, we've learned more and more lessons and more about the squad depth and the style of play and playing personnel as a whole, particularly the younger players. We have learned a bit about the more elder statesmen as well in the squad. But we've learned a lot, Patrick, haven't we? Shane O'Neill will have learned a lot, and the management team there. They will have learned a lot about the squad, even from this league run. And it stands us in good stead. We're probably a lot better off than we were, say, finishing up last year. That defeat to Limerick, or coming in ahead of that championship last year. We're much further down the line now in terms of what the key points we know about the team and the lessons we've learned over the game so far.
Absolutely, yeah. And you think last year as well, there were kind of the 3 or 4 lads like Fintan Burke, Shane Cooney, Sean Loftus, you could argue, Aidan Murphy. They were all in the starting team for the Wexford game in first round of championship, and that was a case of, despite having played a couple of league games back in February and March, it really was a case of being thrown in at the deep end. And in fairness, they all did swim fairly well and cope fairly well with it. But contrast that to this year, you have the same sort of number of lads coming in. You've obviously Nyland is probably the main one. Jam Mannion was probably in with a shout and has a fair amount of work to do now if he's to get back into the picture. But equally, further back the way, the likes of TJ Brennan, Jack Fitzpatrick, Darren Morris as well. You could probably include him in that bracket because his appearances for Galway up to this were fairly sporadic in terms of just his own injury troubles and just not getting his place other days. But he's had a decent sort of run of it in the league now as well. So in terms of those lads now starting, potentially a Leinster semi-final, you'd say they're in a better place to do it than those same 3 or 4 lads were last year. And that can only help when it comes to, by the time that first round actually comes around, and they're probably in a better space to go out and do themselves justice on that day.
Yeah, we do have huge squad depth like that you mentioned there. Now I think we've options all over the pitch. I think we've maybe 3 or 4 pushing for every position, which is fantastic to see. I suppose I'll do a bit on Cork first. We'll run through a bit on Cork and we'll chat about them so far. Would they have been happy with their league? I'd say they probably would be. They're still in contention for a league title, no more than ourselves coming down the line, albeit slightly out of their own hands. They had shown big signs of improvement. The wins over Waterford and Westmeath, with a decent draw against Tip as well, which Tip had to rescue at the death with a long range Jason Ford free. Last weekend though, Jesus, was very disappointing from them in that sense. I thought they were, to be honest with you, I thought they were absolutely abysmal. I thought it was a shocking performance all in. Now I know there was a lot of changes in personnel and an element to shadow boxing, but geez, I thought it was bitterly disappointing, the showing they put in the performance as a whole. I thought they were blown away in the first half. They could have been 20 points down at half time with all Limerick missed and the chances they were creating and the way they wanted to play. But I suppose by and large, Kieran Kingston and co will probably be very happy with the league outside that Limerick blip. They didn't seem overly bothered. I saw just a few flashes of Kieran Kingston popping up last weekend from the footage of the game, and he was kind of smiling at the sideline, and he didn't seem overly bothered. So would you think it's been a good league from a Cork standpoint?
Yeah, I do. And I think the way they started it was hugely impressive. Along with Galway, they looked the team that were kind of furthest down the line in terms of preparation and match sharpness more so than anything. Very impressive against Waterford, who have gone on to have a decent league themselves. In the meantime, so I think Cork were probably similar to ourselves in some respects, in that they had a few issues that they needed to try and iron out. And I don't know are they the whole way there to as regards doing it yet. They had a new goalie to find. Patrick Collins has gone in there and looks to have made it his own, and has had a fine league. Those central spots in defence have been a problem for Cork for a long time, really. Mark Coleman now gone in at 6. Again has had a good league. Having been a very good impressive wing back for Cork for the last number of years since he joined the fold kind of 3-4 years ago at this stage. Equally Damien Cahalane behind. Again, this isn't a new man in that position, or a new trial that they're running there, but it just seems to be going better for them. I find defensively, and I think they're probably in a bit better of a place. And they have decent options. You look at some of the lads that played the last that wouldn't have been regulars up to now, the likes of Robert Downey, who had got a lot of game time the last year or two. Again, Sean O'Leary Hayes, who would have been a minor, played in that All-Ireland minor final 2017 against Galway. He's a decent prospect coming up along. John Millerick, another that would have played that day. So decent options there, and ahead of them, Billy Hennessy I think he's played nearly every match in the league for Cork at midfield, and seems to be growing into it all the time. And ahead of them, there's lads like Robbie O'Flynn. I've been hugely impressed with him throughout the league. A lad who he turns for a goal and puts the head down, and he's impossible to stop. He's a savage burst of pace. He's a right good wing forward now. He's had troubles with injury in the last couple of years. So he's a huge positive for them. And equally inside, young Jack O'Connor, certainly not the biggest in stature, but a classy little corner forward. And then on the bench, there's plenty of talent there as well. And lads who didn't play the last day, who we'd be expecting to all come back in this weekend, the likes of Patrick Organ, of course, Luke Meade, Alan Cadigan, and another fella who's had a right good league, and Alan Connolly from Blackrock. He's been very good at the few chances he's had at the edge of the square. So good chance you might see him again next weekend, and he certainly carries plenty of a goal threat for Garage Mack and the rest of the full back line to deal with. So to be honest, as regards last weekend, I didn't see the game. I saw the highlights on Sunday night, no more than a lot of people, I'm sure. But I really, there was a lot of raving about Limerick after it, and I was delighted to hear it, to be honest, because I think Cork didn't give two hoots about that game whatsoever. I'd say no doubt there'll be disappointment with the performance, especially no more than lads who Galway would have tried out, who would have had limited chances in the league. That was their chance to lay down a marker, and a lot of them obviously didn't do that in terms of the final scoreline was flattering on Cork. But I think that there'll be a different outfit altogether by the time championship comes around. And I think this weekend is a big game for Cork, in that it's their last trial, no more than every other team. But the players they rested last week, they'll all come back in this weekend, I'd imagine, because this is the one game, as we've said plenty of times, that there doesn't need to be any shadow boxing from Cork. And they were holding up their sleeve for Limerick later down the line. They probably did that last week, but they can have a cut off a Galway team who they know are going well, and if they can turn over Galway this weekend, you just think of where their heads are going to be at for the couple of weeks then, as they lead into the Munster quarter final against Limerick. They'll be in a great place. So I think this weekend is important for Cork, and I think we'll have a work cut out to go down there and come away with a win. I think that's for sure.
I'd agree with that too. Just on last week's performance, again, I agree with you wholeheartedly that they didn't give two hoots. But like, it's never good to be taking a hiding like that against a team that you're going to be playing in the first round of championship either. Especially with, like, say, you have a relatively new goalkeeper there in Patrick Collins, and I know he's adjusted. But like, when he looked out there the last day, there wasn't a whole pile of options there, and you're going to be looking at the same thing come championship, albeit maybe with a couple more players that are more willing, more able ball carriers, and because more able ball carriers than the lads that start, and a bit more maturity about their game. Just on the lads that are coming back in, I suppose you touched on a few of them, but like Patrick Horgan, Colm Spillane, Owen Cadigan, Derek Fitzgibbon, Seamus Harney, Alan Cadigan. I don't know what the crack is with Bill Cooper. I think he's a fine midfielder as well. I don't know if it's injury. I haven't seen a whole pile of him during the league, so maybe he's under pressure to come back. It's such a limited time frame. If you think you're going to see him for the opening round of championship, you'd be thinking you should be seeing him, sometime in the league. But maybe that's not the case. I haven't heard a whole pile. But like that options, considering with the players that they have already that started last weekend, you touched on Coleman there, you touched on Damien Cahalan, Robert Downey, Kingston. Like, they have a decent, 10, 12 players there anyway. There might be a couple of positions they might be regarded as a bit light in, but by and large, they have a strong team that could trouble anyone. And, a fine day, decent weather, that running game that they're trying to perfect, it could cause team problems. And I suppose it throws up an element of a different challenge at the weekend from Galway. They looked, at times they can look a small bit over elaborate. Is that something you'd be along the lines of? I think, needlessly, sometimes they could be. It might be better off in their interest to maybe let it go a small bit quicker. Like, I think there was a couple of instances in a couple of games where there's a few lads, maybe Owen Cadigan was maybe 70, 80 yards and goal, and instead of maybe letting the ball in, he turned around and gave it backwards for a hand pass. But maybe a scoring opportunity was on, whereas from a Galway standpoint, you could have a Fintan Burke, or a Limerick standpoint, you could have a Jeremy Burns having a shot from that. I do think that maybe from distance, they probably don't have that threat that other teams have. So yeah, maybe is there an element, Patrick, that at times they can be a bit over elaborate, but in terms of that, it will be another challenge for Galway, and that's a good thing. It'll be a different test to anything we've faced so far.
Oh, very much so, yeah. And I think, for them, that style of game that they're trying to implement, there's against certain things it's going to be easier to implement it than others. And you'd have to say Galway and Limerick are the two most difficult teams that it's going to be to implement it against, purely because of the physical, the work rate, and the intensity they bring to the game. Like, you think of, Conor Whelan's turnover and Gleeson for Brendan Cannon's second goal last weekend. If Cork are in any way over elaborate or taking too much out of the ball, that's going to happen to them time and time again. So, they're going to have their wits about them in that regard, and not give the likes of Whelan and plenty more lads along with them, Concannon and Conor Cooney, all these lads. Well, and if you've got, again, an Agent Chewy up in attack this weekend, who's probably a defender by nature and by reputation with the Galway setup at this stage, he's obviously going to be well able to win turnovers up there as well. So, it's a case of, and again, this isn't the kind of game that you're going to perfect within a couple of weeks. So I think in that regard, it was good to see them stick to it last weekend, if that's what they want to play come championship, because again, that's as good a test for that game as you're going to get coming up against a team like Limerick. And equally, they're going to be tested, and they're going to be made to work the ball cleverly and accurately out of defence if that's what they want to do. So if they can, improve on it again this weekend, it's going to be a positive for them come championship again. And then they're add another 3 weeks of preparation onto it. They could have it close to being perfected by the time championship comes around. So, if that's what they're going to play in championship, there's no point abandoning it if they fall a bit behind in a game here in the league that doesn't really actually matter. So, but I think from a Galway perspective, it's an exciting challenge to be facing this weekend. It's exciting no matter what end of the field you're at, because if you're a forward, you'd say the opportunity for turnovers are there, and how many can we challenge ourselves? How many can we get? And equally at the back, the problems we had last week were probably when water ran at us. So there's going to be no shortage of opportunities to make amends for that this weekend anyhow, because that's what Cork are going to want to do. And our defensive pillars in Garage, Mack and Dahi, they're going to have to be probably more stationary in many respects in terms of holding their positions as much as they can, and equally calling help from in front of them if they need to do so. If you've got a Roman centre forward, or that, you know, that he probably needs to call his midfielders and give them a hand, because he can't be leaving gaps for the likes of the Harndys and the Robbie O'Flynn's and the Dara Fitzgibbons to plough through, you know, down the 6th channel and heading straight for goal. It's only going to end up one place. So, you know, there is a new challenge, as you say, and in terms of organisation, it's going to be hugely important, the communication, how that Galway get that right this weekend. So you're going to need your leaders back there, Garrow and Dahi and Porrick and Éanna Murphy and goal. They all need to be talking and organising it and making sure that they don't leave those big gaps there for Cork to exploit, because in fairness, Cork will exploit them if they're there. So challenging and exciting one. And again, you know, no more than last weekend and the Limerick game before it, you know a lot more about where Galway are at and how they can cope with these different approaches and different styles after this weekend. So yeah, all around it can only serve to benefit Galway going forward, you know.
That's for sure. And Cork carry a serious goal threat as well, like in terms of the top scorers in terms of goals in the championship at the moment. So, you know, that there is that element as well that Galway will have to defend against goals. So that there's going to be, you know, another type of tactical test there for Galway in terms of that. I'll just move on before we move on to a Galway standpoint, and I just go down through the injuries list here that we have at the moment. So from last weekend, Aidan Hart, concussion, Shane Cooney, finger, Johnny Cohen, hamstring, Darren Morrissey, back, Joe Kenning, rib injury as well. I believe they're all doubts ahead of the weekend. Now, you'd hope maybe one or two might make it, you know, come match day. But, you know, they are, the injuries, in fairness, I've been told that they're not considered overly serious and they shouldn't have an effect come championship, but it might be a matter of just sitting one or two out, and probably you're very likely to see, you know, in terms of concussion, Aidan Hart probably rules him out for sure in terms of the head injury protocol. Shane Cooney was another one who, you know, it looked kind of a nasty enough kind of injury. He came off and he was holding his hand, so you'd be very unlikely to see him. And maybe Johnny Cohen hamstring as well. It's not something you really want to risk, either, you know, aggravating that. So if you could get maybe, you know, your Darren Morrissey and your Joe Kenning out of that to get minutes into the legs, you know, you'd be pretty happy overall. On a more positive front, David Burke is back full training this week, so he's back in the fold, and you'd imagine he'll be in contention for selection anyway. You'd like to see him get minutes before championship. I suppose with all that, with those injuries, and if you do take out Aidan Hart, Shane Cooney, Johnny Cohen, it's another chance to test the growing squad depth in our panel and test a few fresher faces again, you know, ahead of championship without too much repercussions, isn't it, Patrick?
Yeah, absolutely. Yeah, no, it's not a bad position to be in at all. And I think, you know, you're right in what you're saying. The kind of the three lads you touched on there, they're probably the most likely to miss out. Like, you know, Johnny Cohen's hamstring, if there's even a 5% doubt over it, you just don't play him, like, because it's the kind of thing. All it takes is one bad turn or one overextension, and his year could be over. Never mind his, you know, first round championship. So the likes of that is just something you don't mess with. You give it the bit of time it needs to come back right. You know, you've our two cornerbacks from last weekend. You've them both mentioned there, and probably your cover cornerback in many respects in Aidan Hart. The three of them possibly going to miss out. But then you look at what you have there. You still have TJ Brennan and Jack Fitz to slot in and fill those number 2 and 4 jerseys. You know, and from what we've seen in the league, again, we have seen the two of them. We've seen a nice bit of the two of them, so you'd have no fear of throwing them both in. And again, it gives them both a chance to, you know, if they get a full 70 minutes or close to it under their belts, to lay down a marker again and put those lads ahead of them that are potentially on the treatment table this week, put them under pressure for their spots. And it'll certainly make training in those positions very interesting over the next couple of weeks. So no, I think it's not a bad position to be in at all. You know, you wholesale changes in terms of 8 or 9 changes like you would have seen going to the tip game, but we're not going to see that. I'd be surprised if, you know, bar a couple of injuries, I'd say there'll be no more than maybe 2 switches in the team. You might see Joseph Cooney coming back in. David Burke likely to come back in, as they're afraid they're happy that he's fully match fit. You know, they're 2 fellas you definitely like to see getting another start. And after that, you know, there might surprise our selection, or maybe another chance for a Niall Burke or something like that.
Evan Nyland, maybe. Evan Nyland would probably be.
Yeah, exactly. Yeah. Well, June or start 2 now, in fairness. Yeah, absolutely. Fully agreed with that. So, but again, they're not changes that are going to hugely impact the shape or the makeup of the team from last weekend. You know, it's not like what you had going into the Tip game with the 9 changes or whatever it was. You know, so. Yeah, you'd be still expecting a very strong team to go out this weekend anyhow, and possibly Sean Lennon as well. Actually, is another fella who might get a bit more game time into him this week. So, again, they're all fairly experienced at this level now, and I certainly have had plenty of game time in the last few weeks. And you know, even Sean Lennon last year, like he had a lot of game time. So, good sign of our panel anyhow. And if we are forced into those kind of maybe 4 or 5 changes, and then see how they go perform, and you know, a strong performance despite those few changes in the team.
That's for sure. I suppose just in terms of team selection then, before we go into the in-depth into the personnel and stuff like that, like, are you looking to set up a team that will go out and out-hurl Cork, or then are you going with the kind of Limerick kind of mantra of maybe out-muscling and dominating the middle third, and, you know, turn it into a physical battle against the Cork setup, you know, because Cork will hurt you if you let them hurl. Whereas like Limerick are case in point, as in they can physically boss them. They can, you know, they can kind of put in the hits that will maybe knock back Cork a small bit, and Galway can do the same. In terms of that, what would you be looking for? Like, what kind of setup would you be looking for? Are you going for a more powerful looking team, or are you going for a more, you know, more of a natural hurling looking team?
Yeah, I think, to be honest, no matter what team we put out, it's going to be a powerful sort of team. I think there's always a balance to be struck in terms of negating the opposition's, you know, their attack and their attacking arsenal going forward. But equally, you know, you don't want to do that and jeopardize and detract from your own game at the same time. So, you know, if it was a case of Galway being a hurling team and saying, geez, no, we'll be physical and we'll front up this week now just to stop the Cork lads hurling, I'd be saying absolutely not. Stay away from that. Do your best at yourselves. But equally, you know, Galway's game is physical no matter what way they try to play. Like, you know, like it's not. I'd be surprised if it was as open as last weekend, because, you know, again, that is going to play into Cork's hands. They love a shootout like that. But we do need to close up those channels in at the back, like I was saying. You know, have a better pillar to our defence in terms of your fullback being positioned there as much of the time, if not all the time, if you possibly can. You know, and having your 6 backs holding their shape as best they can, because like I remember a passage of play in the first half of last weekend. The game's been played around our right half forward position, and Pádraig was on the ball, and Fintan Burke was an option for him to pop it off to, and this was both inside the wall half the field. So you think, Jesus, who's actually down the other end? If it's a quick, you know, they'll launch it long. So it's a case of just being smart, and you wouldn't be saying to Pádraig, geez, you're not to pass the 65 or anything like that, but there's a balance to be struck, as I said, and being smart about it, and make sure you're holding those positions at all times. So if Pádraig does push forward, that there's a David Burke or somebody like that filtering in to his pocket behind him, or wing forward, whoever it may be, you know, and not making it easy for Cork. Have a big gap in front of your cornerback, your Jack Fitzpatrick, your TJ Wren, whoever's there, and Cork able to pin a ball down the line to Patrick Corrigan or Alan Cadigan, whoever they're going to have there, because that's an 80-20 ball every day of the week, but especially to forwards of that quality, like, it's only going to end up one place again. So, you know, you don't want to be detracting from Galway's game, like I say, but I think by holding their position at the backs, we're not going to be doing that. Like, we're still going to have plenty of options up front. We're still going to play with our 2-man inside line and our kind of 4-man half-hour line sort of, you know. It's not like you're going to be saying, we'll play the sweeper this weekend and limit the Cork attack. There'll be none of that.
Stop. Don't say that. Don't say that.
There'll be none of that. I'm not advocating it at all.
Don't be saying that.
You know,
no sweeper.
I think no. A case of playing like we have been playing, and, you know, ensuring that work rate from is still there, like it was last weekend, and just make life as difficult for Cork as we can as they're trying to bring the ball out. And if we do that, it'll make life for our backs a lot easier in any case, you know. So that's the way to play it in my eyes, anyhow.
Yeah, I suppose one position that's probably it's nailed down for championship, and we know 100% it'll be Ian Murphy starting in goals. But is there ever a case this weekend for maybe giving Derek Fahey the start in terms of comes championship, just in case, hypothetically, like, you know, we hope it never comes to pass. But if Ian if it picked up an injury of some kind, if he, you know, a hit coming out with possession, or, you know, hurt his shoulder, or, you know, any number of injuries that can occur to a goalkeeper, like it would be a big test for Derek to come into championship having never played league. If anything happened to Ian at this point, wouldn't it? Like, would there ever be the case? I think we've got plenty out of Ian for the last 4 games. I think we know what we're going to get with him now, or even just maybe even a half for Derek, just to give him get him some minutes and get a feel of, you know, what it's like playing with these lads, and, you know, just even a small taster just in case come championship.
Yeah, well, that's an interesting one, because I was very much of the same opinion of you, or John, in favour of giving Derek a game, or at least a half, as you say, because, you know, it's not like we don't have a James Scahill on the bench anymore, who's been there and done it for over 10 years. Like, it's not a case of him just slotting in and everything being, you know, comfortable in terms of who he's playing with, and equally for the lads in front, having Derek behind him, like, you know. But, you know, when we had James on the show a couple of weeks ago, he was totally against it, and very much for, you know, in favour of the importance of continuity there, and the important, like, you know, because you don't see goals changed that often, obviously in matches or whatever, compared to other positions, you know. Yeah, like I said, you know, and again, he is a goalie, so he'd know a lot better than either of us the importance of having that continuity. So, you know, I'm sure he'd know himself of the benefits for Derek, certainly, of getting a game into him. But the fact that he was still of the opinion that it should be continuing in the jersey the whole time was an interesting point, I thought. So, you know, based on that, you probably won't see it, but still, you know, hindsight could come back to catch them in a few weeks' time if Ina gets a knock in the first 10 or 15 minutes in a semi-final, and Derek is thrown straight in. Like, you know, you're thinking, Jesus, why didn't I give this lad a game or two in the league? But we'll see how it pans out. But I'd be surprised now at this stage if he gets put in for the last round of the league. You know, you would have said that the day against Tip was the day to do it, when they were changing up everything else so much. So I'd be surprised to see it, but I wouldn't mind seeing it anyhow. That's for sure.
Yeah, I'd be of a similar mindset. I actually think it mightn't be a bad thing to give him some minutes at the very least in between the posts, and, you know, just in terms of puck outs and stuff like that, because I think we will be able to vary our puck outs a lot this weekend in terms of Cork. I think we can get a bit of joy from the puck outs on them, whether it be a direct or be a short, and I don't think they're going to squeeze it as much as maybe some of the other teams would have in the recent weeks. I would like, but I suppose there is the element that I suppose Derek has played at pretty high level. Like, he's played at Fitzgibbon for GMIT. He's played at, you know, he's played at under 20, should I say, competition at you know, a highly competitive level as well. But it's still not senior championship, you know, come around, like, and I'd like to just see him get a few minutes. I just have this nagging doubt that I'd like all the boxes ticked before championship, and that would be one I would be worried about in case anything happened. And please God, touch wood and everything, that nothing happens. But
and also there's the other issue that he's not a regular goalie even for his club. You know, where you compare a sub goalie in most other counties, he's a starting goalie every week for his club as well. So, like, realistically, like, the only training Derek Fahey does as a goalie is inside in a county setup, where I'm sure he does a bit one-on-one with different lads or back home in Ardrahan. But in terms of when senior club training comes around with Ardrahan, he's not trained to be a goalie. Like, he's centre back for his club. So there's that as well. Like, you know, it's obviously would have been playing there consistently with the under-20s last year, and that, so prior to Christmas would have got plenty of game time there and whatnot, and did very well, certainly for the Galway under-20s in the couple of games we saw against Laois and Kilkenny. But, you know, different level again and different players around them, because underage level you are actually playing with the same faces pretty much for 5-6 years, going up along through the grades, whereas now you're into a new environment with new players in front of you. no real familiarity with most of the lads in front of you in terms of actually playing with them, whilst you're obviously friendly with them in training and off the field or whatever. It's only the bit you do in training where you get used to what certain lads are like to have in front of you, so that's another, argument and point that is worth being considered when you think of, should we get a bit of game time into this lad. So I think we're probably both of the opinion that we wouldn't mind seeing it anyhow for at least a half next weekend.
Yeah, for sure. I think we could learn a bit from it, and Derek will learn plenty as well, just in case worst case comes to worst. I suppose one of the big changes last weekend was Dahi going to 6 and Garage going to 3. We've been beating the drum here a while on the podcast how we'd like to see it and free Dahi up with be it midfielder, centre back, and we got our wish now last weekend. What did you make of it overall? I know we touched on it in the podcast, and is it something you think we'll see for Cork this weekend? Personally, before we move on, I'd say I think we will. I think we'll go with Garage at 3 and Dahi at 6 again, and I think it could be something we'll persist with ahead of championship.
Oh, definitely, yeah. I think there was no point in even doing it last week if you weren't going to do it again this week, because you were never going to be 100% happy with it after day one. In any case, especially because for Dahi more so than Garage is well used to playing at 3, but again, he's used to having a Pádraig Mannion or someone like that in front of him as well, who's probably dropping back and giving him a hand out, whereas maybe it's having a new player like that from the last day, a lad who's still getting himself fully back to match fitness and match sharpness. Garrod would have learned plenty last year as well from having Dahi in front of him. So and that communication I've mentioned a few times between the two of them, it's so important. And having had the experience of last week now, you'd be expecting the two of them to improve. No end really this weekend. And I'd be very, very surprised to see that combination broken up again, and or for them to swapped or anything like that. I'd be fully expecting Carriage at 3 and Dahi at 6, and probably I'd be expecting the same half back line in its entirety. Pádraig, Dahi and Fintan, because think saying now if you're to name your championship half back line, that would be it at the minute. I reckon anyhow. So I just definitely like to see that remain intact, and after that, you might be forced into change in the back line, but you couldn't nail down your 2 starting cornerbacks for championship at the minute in any case, even if they're all fully fit standing in front of you. So I wouldn't be as concerned about that, or if changes are to be made there. But those other 4 spots, I definitely like to see them remain the same. And I'm sure you're on the same boat on that front, I'm sure.
Yeah, I think that half-back line in particular you mentioned there, that would be a fairly dominant half-back line come championship. And I could see no reason to change it at all ahead of championship now, considering on the evidence of what we see. I just think they just offer you a lovely combination there. You kind of can do it all. There's a lot of there's a lot of power, and there's no one going to rain dropping balls down on top of them. And I thought Pádraig in particular last week, he probably had his best game in a long time for Galway, and it's no coincidence he was back at 5, which is his best position. I think we can all accept that now. He's a fine stand-in 6, we'll say, if issues arise. But I think we'll Galway get the best out of Pádraig Mannion when he's playing at number 5, and I think Fintan is he's a frighteningly good talent. I think he has it all in terms of his huge skill levels, as we've seen with sideline cuts and his ability to score from deep, and never mind his defensive attributes as well and his power. And sure, we all know Dahi, and Dahi probably has an element of his game that maybe Garage Mac wouldn't have there, or even he has that level of being able to burst out with possession, and he can set up a move there, and his own point he managed to pick off a point as well, which got received huge cheer from the Galway subs and people in it. And he was also there to set up Sean Loftus as well when he burst out of defence. So he has that element of his game, that sudden burst from 20-30 yards before popping a hand pass off. And he's well capable of scoring it, as we can see as well, which might have gone under the radar a small bit, but we've seen in club action. Just in terms of defensively, Patrick, I know Cork would probably be sweating over who's going to pick up Brian Kincannon, who's going to pick up Conor Whelan, but we leave that to them. But in terms of Galway, and I suppose if one man you're going to have to keep an eye on, a close eye on, will be Patrick Horgan. And we touched on there that maybe our fullbacks our 2 cornerbacks from last weekend could be out in Shane Cooney and Darren Morrissey. So that maybe Patrick Horgan goes into the corner, should I say, So what do you do with that scenario, and who do you see picking up like what that in terms of matchups there in Galway, particularly in the full back line? Like how do you see that panning out?
Because I can't see there being a man marker or anything like that. I do think that no matter what six is picked back there, I think they'll go out and hurl their position, because, you know, again, it's the kind of game where you want to learn about lads as well. And, you know, if you have a TJ Brennan or whoever in cornerback, and Patrick Arden comes into Markham, you're going to learn a lot about TJ Brennan in that 70 minutes, no matter what way it goes, you know. He's either going to have done a fairly good job and one of the best forwards in the country for the last decade, or else he's going to have got a roasting, and you're going to realise that maybe this lad isn't quite up to it yet, you know. So I wouldn't be for protecting certain players, or, you know, isolating certain players to do certain jobs in a game like this. Different now if we're playing Cork in a knockout championship game. You might have plans in place for certain players, but I'd be very much of the opinion of go out and hurl your position basically. And if you're good enough you should be good enough to hold your own in there at this stage of the year, at this level, no matter what what Cork player comes in on top of you. Because, you know, the other corner you're going to have Alan Cadigan possibly, or a Jack O'Connor, or, you know, full forward you could have Alan Connolly or whoever, a Declan Dalton, some lads like this. So the threats are going to be there in every position of the Cork attack. So I'd be certainly of the opinion to go out, and like it's probably going to be that 15 corner that Hurling would more than likely play in, unless he plays out like he did against Westmeath. And, you know, it's a position I can see him being very effective in as well. But equally, like if he's out there, he's going to be picked up by whatever Galway member of that back line is in that position as well. So I'd be surprised to see a designated sort of man marker on any Cork player this weekend, to be honest. Barron would say you'd probably look at, you know, your more defensive minded midfielder to match up on Darragh Fitzgibbon, be it Johnny Cohen or David Burke or whoever is there alongside, more than likely Cahill. You know, you'd be expecting them to match up with Fitzgibbon and leave Cahill on more than likely Billy Hennessy. But that's the only one I'd see really. I don't know. Would you any thoughts on that from your perspective? Would you see a man marker on Horgan, or?
I would have a little. I wouldn't be as go out on you and say hurl your man, because they're fairly inexperienced. The players that might be coming in, like Jack Fitzpatrick and TJ Brennan, potentially, if they are the two that do come in, provided the lads are out injured. I wouldn't like to see any of them get a roasting against a shrewd Horgan. Like Horgan, he's a fair detail, truth be told. Like he's a fair operator, and I wouldn't like to see anyone, you know, get their confidence knocked for six in terms of that, of taking on one of the best hurlers in the country. Like if the roles were reversed and say Joe Kenning was starting inside for Cork, you can be sure they're going to have a designated man marker for them. Now, I don't know if Mac is the answer in the corner in terms of being that, and that might be the case that you might be better off in terms of, you know, are you robbing Peter to pay Paul in terms of sorting that problem out, which is what I could agree with. But I just have an inkling. I wouldn't like to see any of them, you know, pick up an awful like a roasting and, you know, set them back, you know, potentially, you know, do a lot of damage to their confidence ahead of championship, or, you know, because they are in their formative years. They're still fairly young hurlers in the grand scheme of things. TJ Brennan in particular was still only under 20 last year. Like, so in terms of that, you know, I might be looking to see where is Patrick Horgan playing, and I'll say, look, at maybe X, Y, and Z, whoever Shane O'Neill and the boys decide to pick up, maybe, you know, you have a go on him there. Maybe you draft Finton back to cornerback or something like that, and you pay TJ Brennan wing back, you know, because Finton is a bit further down the line, and, you know, he might be a relatively young player, but he's still, you know, he's more experienced than the likes of that, and that way you're not shifting or you're not shifting Garage back from the central axis there. And you mentioned midfield, Patrick. I suppose Cahill now nailed on midfield. I can't see any reason to play him anywhere else outside maybe a quick 10 minutes here and there, maybe to get a bit of oxygen back in the lungs. But the question remains, who is going to partner him come championship? Johnny Cohen, I think there's probably a chance he mightn't play at the weekend. So our options there are Sean Loftus, who had a fine game last weekend. I thought looked a fine fight for Cahill. Did a lot of good stuff around the middle third. Looked a lot more comfortable than he was a cornerback. By and large, seemed to relish playing in that position. Then you have David Burke just back from injury, needs to get minutes, have to give him minutes, you know. And the same could be said with Sean Linehan as well. like Sean Lennon seems to be, we've touted the prospect of him playing in the corner in the past, considering he's club form. But intercounty management seem to think that his best position is midfield, and sure, look at who are we to argue. So like, you have a host of options there. I think Cahill has to play midfield. I think he put his feet up for half against Tipperary, for the bulk of maybe 40-50 minutes against Tipperary. So I'm sure he'll play this weekend again and let him play. So who goes in there with him? Like it'd be very harsh on Sean Loftus to not get the start again this weekend. But on the counterpoint, David Burke, Sean Lennon, they need minutes as well.
Yeah, it's an interesting debate to be had, because there's pros to every argument you make and every pairing you put up, because like based on form, like Sean Loftus deserves another game there this weekend, but equally you do that and David Burke gets 20 minutes at the end, or equally Sean Lennon, you'd say, are either of these, but certainly Sean Lennon. Where about David Burke has over a decade of experience at this stage, at this level. Sean Lennon, you probably couldn't confidently consider him as a starter for a Leinster semi-final off the back of only having played, whatever, he got five or 6 minutes last weekend, and maybe the same, or 10 or 15 minutes next weekend. So, to be honest, if I was picking it right now, I'd probably have David Burke in there, with Cahill, because in my head it's a combination I can see working. And if I was to pick our midfield pairing right now, I'd probably pick those two, and based on what I saw in the first half against Limerick. But still, I'd like to see more of it before actually down a decision in my head. So I'd definitely like to see the two of them go together this weekend. And if David Burke got 40 good minutes into him, I'd have no problem hauling them ashore again, and getting Loftus and Lynn, and possibly the two of them even in at that stage, and let them have another run at it and see who's the next best bet to be in behind them. It's probably a bad time for Johnny Cohen to pick up a little knock, because he does have those 3 or 4 serious contenders piling up behind him, and he could miss out as a result of not doing a thing wrong. Really, he's had a decent league, but a good performance this weekend by someone with Cahill would have Johnny Cohen under a lot of pressure over the next few weeks, that's for sure. So there's arguments to be made on every side, and they have to come down on one lad, and sure. Probably be David Burke for me anyhow. But I've been wrong before.
Well, there's every chance. That's a minefield to try and pick from, to be honest with you, because there's any amount of combat, and maybe there's the combination of Cahill actually sits the game out. You know what I mean? We've seen what he can do during the league, and he's told before, and this is the chance. We want to see a couple of other guys there in terms of who can partner you. So you could have a David Burke, Sean Loftus, or Sean Lennon and Sean Loftus, or vice versa. Or you could mix and match there to see it, and you could always keep Cahill back in reserve. And if the game is going away, you can bring him on and he can steady the ship, because he's been arguably, one of Galway's best players in the league so far in his outings. I suppose, like in terms of that, it'll be a great test for that Galway midfield. Derek Fitzgibbon is, he's a serious operator, huge pace. We're going to learn a lot about whoever does pick him up and see can they put the shackles on him. You're right when you said on the Johnny Cohen thing. Very unfortunate timing for injury, and if anything, the kind of cards fell into place when he went off. Not his fault, but the cards fell into place from a Galway standpoint, and in the switches that kind of seem to coincide around that move. And he'll probably be under pressure now. Which we said it a couple of episodes back that he was probably the front runner to partner Cahill in midfield, whereas now maybe there's the case that maybe he's fallen back in the pecking order, as you said, through no fault of his own. Just moving further forward, I suppose Conor Whelan, he's probably played the bulk of the minutes. Maybe has he? I think he's played every minute so far. No, outside maybe it was taken off early against Westmeath. But is there ever a case he's rested at the weekend? But I think it's the perfect game to try him at centre forward. We saw what Mark Coleman, Mark Coleman, you've touched on it there, fantastic hurler, beautiful stick man, so silky skill wise. As a man marker, I'm not sure. We saw Keane Lynch run him up last week in man of the match performance. I thought Coleman was very quiet, albeit in a new look defence where there was extra burden on him, to try and track Lynch, to try and hold the space. It's a match up there that if Whelan starts at centre forward, we could potentially get a lot of joy from.
Definitely, I definitely agree. And even looking at the league highlights on Sunday night, they were talking about Austin Gleeson, the centre back, and they're making the point that I don't know, is Austin Gleeson's first instinct on the field a defensive sort of instinct? Not that it's not to say that he's a poor defender or whatever, but his first instinct is probably more so, what can I do going forward? Can I get my hands in the ball here and make something happen? I think Mark Coleman is very much a similar sort of player, and equally, we've never seen Mark Coleman further up than the half back line, but still, when he was playing at 7 the last few years, now at 6 again. When you're raving about Mark Coleman after a game, it's because of what he's provided going forward, more than what he's done going back. And again, that's not to say he's a poor defender. He's made an awful lot of vital interventions and interceptions going back the way as well. But he's a huge launch pad for Cork in terms of picking out passes 30, 40 yards in front of him, and always being an outlet. If it's the fellow beside him under pressure, he always seems to be an outlet in a bit of space, and he doesn't need a lot of space to make things happen. So, I mean, if you've got if you're faced up with Conor Whelan and you're looking to be that outlet as well, it's not going to be quite as comfortable an afternoon as you're probably used to in other games. So, I'd love to see it, because you can have Whelan working it both ways in terms of actually taking away from Cork's attacking launch pad, in terms of making life as difficult for Coleman as possible. And equally, when Galway on the ball, he can go whenever he wants and try and drag him all over the place. And if he gets ball again, he's going to be testing out Coleman's defensive capabilities as well. So, I think he's the perfect man for the job anyhow, isn't he? And equally, for me, again, if you feel him doing that, it just opens things up for Evan Ireland to be that floating member of the half-forward line and get on ball, and just he's going to find himself in a bit of space and potentially knocking over 3 and 4 points again. It's just the perfect file for me, Ireland, is to what Galway are doing there. So, we touched on his cameo last weekend, coming on scoring the 4 points, and I'd be saying to him, hopefully starting this weekend. I'd like to see him start and just go out and do exactly what you did for 40 minutes last weekend. Do it for 70 this week and rack up 6 points if you want.
Exactly. And I suppose this is the case, if Joe does miss out, he will be there, the option for the freeze as well, which is huge. But I'd like to see him starting regardless of the freeze. And I think you're bang on the money when you describe Whelan as the perfect man for Mark Coleman. I think he's an absolute nightmare for Mark Coleman in terms of that matchup. Now, no more than yourself, I've got these things wrong before, but I think he's completely the perfect man there for centre forward against a Mark Coleman type figure he will hassle Harry. He'll do the tackling, but he'll do the attacking work again. I suppose Conor Cooney is the next one I kind of wanted to touch on. More minutes into the legs. He had a bit of an injury after the Westmeath game, so he missed out the game that followed against Limerick. But look back to resembling somewhat of his 2017 form last weekend. He had the work rate and effort he brought to last year in terms of his performance, but he added the score and the small bit of creativity to his play as well last weekend, which was very promising signs. And he's done no harm for his selection options. And for me personally, he's a nailed on starter come championship now, given what he displayed last weekend against Waterford.
Yeah, and you'd like to see, having made fairly big strides in terms of performance last week, you'd like to see him hopefully building that again next week, because but even last year, the Wexford game was his best game of championship last year, and he kind of gradually, his performance levels dipped game on game after that. So you'd be hoping that he'd take a bit of confidence from last weekend and go out and build on it again next week, because you consider his point in the second half where he jinked inside 3 or 4 different tacklers and scooped the ball over off his left. That was prime Conor Cooney sort of play that like you would have seen in 2017. There's no one in the county with better wrists than Conor Cooney, and they were on full display there. That was just a brilliant score. And equally, very unlucky for 2 goals in the first half. Didn't do a lot wrong either time. Did very well to take Canning's pass and even get a shot off for the one that ended up being Canning's goal, and equally the one where he took on his man in along the end line, burned him, and then got 2 shots away, and they were both saved. So didn't do a lot wrong there in either case. So I'd certainly be all for him getting more game time. And if it was in the inside line with alongside Concannon, I wouldn't mind that either, because that's obviously where he had started the last day, and then things changed when Johnny Cole went off. So he was going all right in there as well. But as well, he is that puck out option, and I think he caught one anyhow last week, if not two. So he is a good option in either line. But yeah, I'd be in agreement in terms of it. I'd like to see him there again this week anyhow. Yeah,
that's for sure. I suppose one thing, strange enough, I suppose I wanted to touch on was maybe Niall Burke's situation. Went back to the bench. Like when O'Neill went to the bench against Waterford. Niall and Joseph Cooney, Kevin Cooney, Conor Walsh. It's a curious one, because Niall Burke, he hurled well against Westmeath, I thought, and I thought he hurled well against Limerick, but he seems to have fallen back the pecking order again all of a sudden, and not getting. He came on against Tipperary, and he saw no minutes against Waterford. Is it a strange one, Patrick, or can he feel hard done by, or is it the case that maybe it's just where he doesn't fit the mould of the player that O'Neill wants in the current structure and system that they want to play? The two-man inside line of, like, say, Kenning and Brian Concannon. Maybe Niall Burke doesn't give us that, that level of player. Like, and that's no slight on him, but they are just two of the best forwards in the game. And maybe he's not his best use. He's close to goal, and maybe someone like a Conor Cooney is a better link man there between the two lines. As the fourth wing forward, rather than Niall Burke.
Yeah, it's very possible, I think, and equally, if you're not considering him as one of the inside two, which you probably aren't, truth be told, if considering the combinations that we want to see and we need to see in there, then you're looking at the half forward line, and the way the game is now, and you're picking a Conor Cooney or an Adrian Tuohy or a Joseph Cooney as your wing forwards. Their wing forwards are going to offer you a lot going back the field as well as going forward, in terms of the ground they're going to cover, the challenges they're going to put in. And maybe Niall Burke doesn't just quite fit that mould either, in terms of being a Tom Morrissey type figure, for Galway. So yeah, you can definitely feel hard done by in terms of his performance the first 2 days. Certainly merited further game time thereafter, but equally, maybe he's been put in those positions in training since and hasn't done what management needed him to do. So we're only looking at them once a week or that, whereas management just seen them 2 or 3 more nights in a week as well, and you can be sure they're playing plenty of conditioning games in training as well. So how you get on in those carries a lot of weight in terms of team selection, that as well, you can be sure. So that's they're the kind of the only things I can think of as to why he wouldn't be there, because certainly from our perspective, I think we're both in agreement. And I've long not been Niall Burke's biggest fan in terms of I think he has had an awful lot of chances in the last kind of 5-6 years to nail down a spot and has never actually done it. But I was one of the first to commend him on his performance the first 2 days. I thought he did very well, and he did. Again, like I said before, he did what he should have done in terms of he was winning long ball. A man his size and his strength should be doing that, and he wasn't consistently doing it before. The amount of balls that were hitting his hand and falling out, in previous years, but they were sticking the first 2 days. And based on that, if he was bringing that every day, he has an awful lot to offer. So yeah, like I say, we only see them once a week, and in some cases we don't see that every week at all. So, and in his case, we haven't seen him in about a month now. So there's obviously more to it, and maybe just doesn't quite fit the mold that they're looking for, as you say.
Yeah. I suppose sadly it's Páirc Uí Chaoimh. It's promised to be, I think, a decent enough day down there, and weather-wise, it's an awful pity there's no crowds. Like we're actually beating the drum and beating that. It would have been a nice bumper crowd, a nice trip. It's actually going to be my first time in the new Páirc Uí Chaoimh. I'm sad to say I haven't been there yet, so it's looking forward to that in that sense. It's but it's a kind of venue that should bring the best out of both teams, Patrick. And I expect a bit of a humdinger of a game similar to Waterford. I expect a bit of a shootout, to be honest with you. Would you be along those lines as well?
Yeah, very much so. Yeah, very much so. I think I'd be fully expecting Galway to embrace the surroundings in Páirc Uí Chaoimh and make the most of it, because again, Galway seniors haven't been there since it opened up. The minor, I was there the day it opened. All right, the minors played Clare in the All Ireland quarter final in 2017. wasn't working out, but just went down just to see it and see the match and whatever. But it's class down there. Amazing stadium. And again, that was with only a small enough sort of crowd that day too. But you'd love to see it now Saturday evening or something like that in Páirc Uí Chaoimh with a bumper crowd like you had for that Cork Limerick epic there about 3 years ago or whatever it was. It's class in that regard. But we have what we have on Sunday, 1:45 throw in, I think. It's going to be on the TG4 app, which is great, provided it works, because I know there's been plenty of problems with it in recent weeks with people watching it. So hopefully all will be well in that regard. And as you say, good weather, good stadium, good pitch, two exciting attacking teams. I'd be expecting a cracker, high scoring, as you say. So look, we'll be hoping and we'll be expecting to rattle the onion bag again with the likes of Brian Cannon and Conor Whelan and Joe Kenny all going so well like they were last week. So here's hoping anyhow. And equally, whatever way it goes, you'd still, in terms of how the game develops, you'd be saying that, Galway certainly have the capability and the firepower to go down and pull off a win down there.
Absolutely, I'd concur with those sentiments fully. With that, we'll wrap it up there. Just before we head off, as usual, the shout out to our sponsors there, Tony Burke Motors and Ballyrit. Fantastic as always. That have rode in behind us for this league campaign. Huge asset in addition to us in terms of getting these podcasts out and footing the costs that are associated with it. So anyone looking new, used car, head in there, drop our names into the hat while you're at it, and say that you're looking for a good deal. I'm sure they'll sort you out in there. We'll wrap it up there. We'll be back for our final league show probably early next week, and then there'll be a bit of a break before championship fever hits fully, and it's going to be very exciting anyway. We'll leave it there, Patrick. Thanks a million for joining me, and we'll chat again soon.